Hi, everyone. Welcome to this show, this live transmission. I have a very special guest with me tonight, as always. His name is Joshua Sisler. And, well, Joshua Sisler and I will be presenting on the Alien event this in September from 12th to 14th, to September the 14th in Las Vegas. And this is an event, a super big event that has been produced by David Farman. So I'm very much looking forward to share in person with you, Joshua. Of course, the people, the tribe, the audience that is joining us right now will see how many points of communion we have. However, this is just the beginning. So, as I said, very much looking forward to meet you in person and sharing more. So, welcome.
In the divine light. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. And yeah, I'm excited to tune in with you. I know you're an open channel right now. And so as conscious beings come together, let's see what we unlock. And I know we haven't pre-planned anything. So let's just jump in and see what we can tune into.
Exactly. So whoever is watching this transmission, if you want to ask something, to comment something, just feel free. We're going live in my YouTube channel and also in my Facebook. There is something in my Facebook that I cannot go public right now, just to my friends community. But after the transmission finishes, I will definitely be putting it in public. So thank you so much. So Joshua, can you share with us a little bit, how did you begin this path? Because I know that you have very interesting codes that you have been, like translating yourself. Yet I would love to know.
Wow. Well, my background, it has to do with, crystals and becoming highly in tune with crystal consciousness, and there was a time, I think 2009, 2010, when I started getting hyperactivated, meaning crystals found their way back into my lifetime in this incarnation. And I believe that when you start to get access to the crystals, they hold a form of sympathetic resonance. And once you even have, a direct connection, you can actually start to attune to that resonant vibration. It's the same way that a tuning fork will find its sympathetic resonance. And so if you start to work with crystals and have them around you, it's the first stepping stone to creating that resonant vibration. And I believe that the human body is very unique, and we're one of the few things that actually has a conscious quantum, a crystalline attunement to us. So we have access, and I believe it happens instantaneously. This is our organic earth right. This is how this technology has been built into us. Literally, it's biogenics. It's like the same way that we look at biophotonics. Anytime we talk about the bio expression, it's the bioorganic expression of our life force energy. And so if we're talking about biogenetics or biogenics or biophotonics, we're going to be talking about, the expression of intelligence of our life, emitting, energy, information, light.
Yes, I agree. And this is a topic that I always like to convey, to put out, Like when we get how a very specific biological form of existence functions, then we actually get to understand how we work. Of course, at different scales, of course, with specific differences. But when it comes to the universe, it's just the same formula at different levels. You know, I know that you mentioned crystals. Is we know the natural piezoelectric well, actually, we know about the piezoelectric nature in our body. We know that there are magnetites in our brain. And, you know, of course, when you were talking about the sympathetic, it also came to me, you know, like these mirror neurons. Like every time that we are in front of beings of consciousnesses that reflect in a very clear way our who we are, then the portal expands, and we are not only capable to communicate with them like intimately, we are also capable to activate ourselves, everything that we are seeing in them, you know. And yeah, like for instance, if you start communicating, you spoke about crystals, but also if you start communicating with trees, then the nature that is like our neurons, our very same body, the hologram of the tree of life starts to generate a resonance, and then we start to get it, you know, how trees exist, how trees behave, and then we start to not copy their way, yet just activating, remembering, and putting it in practice. So
yeah, that kind of guides you right into the intelligence of the entheogenic medicine on this planet, which is the intelligence of the living essence of the plants, right? And so right away, when you brought up the trees, we have to think about the sacred seeds. And, you know, anytime you are taking part of these indigenous ritualistic practices, they very much are bringing sacred seeds to honor in these ceremonies, because the seed holds intelligence. And we know how many generations of lineage are connected through the intelligence. And certain, you know, mycelium networks, they say that a redwood tree, you know, it supplies, you know, communication to almost the whole forest because of its level of intelligence. And so certain trees are anchors for that intelligence as well, and they share, and they're the teachers. And so here we are learning from the divine source of information coming from the earth as intelligence. But what I kind of wanted to jump into as well is it wasn't just the crystals. There was many different activations that started to take me to this level of understanding how do we access the information. And it came through kind of like an awakening that I had at the temple at Burning Man, I think 2010. And I brought with me a crystal to the center of the vortex. And there's already so many people who are basically in prayer at this sacred temple, and there's a lot of energy there. But I brought with me a very important crystal, and I started kind of activating it with ultraviolet light, because someone had gifted me a little tiny ultraviolet light. And it started kind of like activating almost like Pandora's box inside the crystal. I'd noticed that the light would get trapped into these secret little pockets where there would be, you know, almost like fractures in the crystal, but it would also lock that energy into these sacred little, it was like, it felt like I was opening up something. And so all of a sudden, I started to have an awakening come through. What is happening? Why am I all of a sudden having information come through me through this interaction? And so later on, I started to understand that crystals, you know, have a unique reaction to the ultraviolet light. And ultraviolet light is also a unique representation, you know, a back engineering representation of the auric energy, our photonic expression of light. So the same way that ultraviolet light would affect the crystal is the same exact way that our biophotonic aura will be affecting the crystal. So it mimics that interaction. And so here we are, once again, tying it all back together, that we are literally the tool that is meant to communicate. And it also gets into magnetics, and that's really important. But first step was the ultraviolet light being what I believe a rainbow bridge of perception, giving access to information that is stored in alternate dimensions. And so it gets really exciting. We can get into quantum information, crystals, and how that all created the quantum qubit resonance if we want. But I'd love to just follow your lead here. But yeah, so it's ultraviolet light and crystals create almost like a rainbow bridge.
Yeah, now what it brings me is to plasma and the different forms of or state of plasma, you know, as this electric current or charge collapse. And well, before getting there, we both are, you know, like navigating this this ship. So feel free also to Yeah. So, like in relation to that, let's say UV light, as we know, the first thing that comes to us when we listen to the UV light is, like coming from the sun. So this, as we know, leads to many things, because this is also something that I know that you talk about, which is the black hole at the sun's core, because the level of UV light that is created by the sun is not proportional just to be a star, it requires to have a black hole inside. And actually, I've seen many of the artifacts, because for the people that doesn't know, Joshua is also very much into ancient artifacts, or let's say ET artifacts. And one of the biggest properties that these ET artifacts show is very specific crystals, like in this case, the calcite, that when it's not only, for instance, just quickly, because we will go deeper into it, but just so that people can see, like this huge cube, it's super heavy. We remove the dirt from it. This is why perhaps, but here is the scarab. If you see, like there is the scarab, and the thing is that this is pure calcite, and as like, but the thing is that it also has, as its construction um, is like geopolymers. And the thing is that through those properties, then this capability of glowing in the dark is possible, because this cube glows in the dark.
Yeah, I talk about that a lot too. And that's kind of what led me into this whole topic of the phosphorescence and the ultraviolet light, because this was a long time ago when I had this activation, and now it's all, all of the information acquired, I think in the past 10 to 12 years has led to the full understanding. And then it gets really deep into the quantum physics and quantum computation. That's when it got really amazing, because that phosphorescent expression of light is actually truly it's intelligence of light that's entangled with another particle in the quantum field, or we could call it the Akashic records. A lot of people, we can tie those together. Exactly. But quantum physics will call it the quantum field. Metaphysics will call it the Akashic records. And, yes, we even hear about as the halls of Amante and in Egyptian mythos. And there's definitely the halls of records. So we understand, and there's definitely, they've myths of, keys and the divine triangle being one of the portals that allows us to open it up. And what I believe that is literally the divine triangle is the third eye connected to the two eyes that take in our reality. But the pineal gland is what processes our inner vision, right? Because we have a lot of the information that we take in, it's a collaboration of how we manifest our reality. And that's why there's such an attack on our emotional responses to everything right now. We're being so highly tested right now. Everything coming through our devices is, it's highly manipulated in a program, an agenda to manipulate our consciousness, because us as a collective, right, we are a force. We are a sacred collective force of energy. And so, right, everyone wants to preach harmony, but there is some interesting tactics that they're doing right now to directly affect our emotional response to these, actions. So just be aware, we are obviously conscious observers of information that flows through us at all times. So as long as we're aware of the emotional response is one of the ways we take control of that.
Yes, you touched like a very core point of everything. Like mostly when we talk about emotions, then we immediately direct it to a very sentimental form, romantic form, like trying to, the shadow work. But the thing is that emotions is energy in motion. And when we stop being afraid of our emotions, we can actually use them on our behalf, because that's the purpose. For me, this reality is a test for us to show that we are ready to embody that unified consciousness, this unity consciousness, so and this is very much like everything begins in your perception, in your form of perception, because I was even talking about this earlier, is like the way that how I perceive it is that now that the theory of we're living in a simulation and so forth is like, the more that you're unconscious, you're just running through this reality through algorithms. You're just existing through algorithms dictated by an alter intelligence, to say it somehow. The moment that you wake up is because you're using your consciousness to go beyond those algorithms and then therefore create ripples in time. And this is very much entangled to memory. Every time that we are remembering, remembering how to use our emotions, remembering what these codes are, remembering who we are, and so forth, what, like, quantumly or even at an astrophysics level, what is happening, because the universe, like, they also, like, the other day I was tuning into this information and it just fascinated me, like how the astrophysicists physicists access to the memory, to the information that is inside the black holes, and they use the gravitational waves in a way that it's the vacuum polarization to then go into, let's say, I won't go very like into like a lot of scientific terms, but the thing is that just imagine that you want to access to some information and it's deep within. You don't know where that deep within is going to lead you to, but you're too afraid to go yourself. So what do? So therefore you start to moving in the field through your magnetic field, and you start to create this gravitational waves, which would be, in other terms, magnetizing the information. It's like when this laws of manifestation tell you, you don't need to go and chase something, you need to attract it to your reality. Well, it's the same. And memory is information is energy. So everything is what we could call, as how I perceive it, is the space memory network. It's information that has happened, that will happen, or that it's mainly happening, simultaneously happening. Yet, due to our level of perception, we try to linearly order it in past, present, and future. But anyway, so then when they start to emit these gravitational fields, waves, all the way to the black hole, what they are creating, due to, they play, let's say, with two different shapes, so let's say two celestial bodies, two spaceships, two different forms. And the way that these two different forms start to interact with one another is also what amplifies that gravitational field. So their field in between these two objects, which also is what happens when, for instance, you and I are talking and we remember through each
For
other.
sure.
Yeah, exactly, because your field is different, has a different shape, a different geometry than mine, But when we are talking, when we are emitting this magnetic wave field, then we start to create ripples in time. And those ripples are mainly those two forces, which in this case would be our electromagnetic fields, you know, dancing. And then as they come from different shapes, what they're going to do is, instead of sucking one another, they're going to pull outwards, and then that ripple is generated and a memory comes, so we
Yes.
can do this all the time. What would be not sucking one another? In terms of, let's say, a daily life basis, it would be not falling into the drama.
Yeah, there we
Well,
go.
just to stay in the observer,
Yes.
also in the active, but then not falling for the drama, not falling into those emotions. So then you keep your level of coherence, and then, like, magic happens. Memory emerges, you
Yes.
know?
I think all of this technology has to do with magnetic energies, especially when it comes down to the crystalline resonance that communicates with the pineal gland. And so I'll kind of dive into that because I love how you got into that. And I believe that our auric field, everything that we express, is also a form of, piezoelectric pressure upon the earth, which is always constantly creating a sympathetic, communion that we have. And it's not just the fact that, well, think about if we're just walking on cement, then we're not getting our direct connection to Gaia. But there's an auric energy that we have that I believe is also an expression of like you said, the magnetic field. But the magnetic field isn't always seen. It's felt. It's felt through electron excitation. And once those electrons are in an excited state, they can actually phase lock together. And that's when you actually feel the excitation connecting. And it's a harmonious connection. So like you're saying, and we're humans, we are also, electric, and magnetic beings. So when we come into each other's field, we can also access information through each other's field. And it's the same way with psychics and intuits. And there's ways that we can access, like you said, we can do we have infinite potential. So, but when we actually apply pressure, right, and connect through mudras, then we have a direct, a link. And there's a way that we can create a multi-dimensional piezoelectric receptivity. And so there's a lot involved with mudra magic, and we've been slowly learning more and more about the true potential of collective mudras and what that really does. Because when we all link up our biofield and we're all connected through sacred, pressure and applying energy activations through mudras, it actually can open up what I believe is Stargate technology. Absolutely. And just something that we witnessed less than a month ago, we were up in the river in Northern California, and I was kind of in a positive state with all of my art crew. We were painting for a massive, festival that was happening called Northern Nights. But all of us as artists, we bring a live painting production. And so all the artists were up there creating visual activations, visual codes through art. And a lot of the artist's energy is consciousness reincarnated, because we come back to share the information. And, even in the Mayans had a name for the artists. They honored them because they understood that they were consciousness that came back to document the information through artistic expression. And so as we're in the river, we kind of had a beautiful opportunity to activate this mudra medicine. And so I initiated everyone with this mudra that I believe gives you access to. It's a representation of the 4 continents that surround Mount Meru.
Oh, one, yeah.
Hyperborealis. And I was actually activated by these elders that came to me at a Heart and Solstice gathering in 2016. But they asked a lot of questions about the work that I was doing. And then they looked at each other and smiled and made sure that I was going to learn this mudra. And then they touched their third eye. But what this is a representation of the magnetic vortex, while all compasses read to magnetic north. It's a sacred, magnetic mountain that's called Rupus Negra, or Hyperborealis, or Mount Meru in Hindu and Tibetan religion. But it's a representation of vortex energy. And some believe it's truly just a cymatic vortex, but some believe it's an entrance as a vortex to, Shambhala and Agartha in Middle Earth. So there's a lot of interesting energy behind the mudras. But after we did this, we literally found a tablet that was part of a prophecy in the middle of the river. And this was in Northern California. Wow. And it was a black diamond granite tablet that was casted into creation sometime in 2012. But it's part of an 8,000-year-old prophecy. There was only 1,000 of these that were created, and they were anchored into certain vortex points around the planet. And so everyone we were with was freaking out because we just did this mudra, and this gold Tibetan tablet came out of the river. And so what I'm saying is that I believe it's very possible that, we could have created an energy vortex. We don't know when this tablet was anchored into this river, but there's only 1,000 of them, and they're part of a prophecy. And it's about quantum technology and the suppression of ancient information. And, there's a lot to the prophecy. So once you access the information, even the tablets being within your presence, then you're a part of this prophetic energy. So now we're taking that all in right now. But I'll try and send you some images so you can just get an idea of what this tablet really represents.
Yes, please do so. Yeah. And that's amazing. And there are so many ways that I can address to that, because as we know, there are very specific points in our body. This is even shown in Hermetic texts, in ancient texts, that we have black bodies here, and when we use the word, for instance, black hole, people will feel familiar into that cosmic black hole, sucking everything. The thing is that we have black hole tech in our body, and we are using it at every time, through every synapses in our neurons, through the creation of ATP, through at every moment we're creating black hole tech, which is the vacuum polarization, which is what is happening now in the Earth with the magnetic poles, which is what's happening in the sun every 11 years with its own magnetic poles. So this is pointing out that, it's at the same, just at different levels. And this is what we are going through by reversing our magnetic poles, by what we used to believe is not anymore what we are in resonance with. So when you're using this vortexes, you are honoring your geometrical body, your holographic body, and then the universe responds. Because, and I was again talking about this in the morning, I'm not surprised at all, that everything is so aligned to what we are talking about right now. It's like every time that I'm connecting with these artifacts, I get this acknowledgement that throughout time, like that Gregorian time, it creates disruption in our holographic field, in our holographic body. So the angular momentum, or let's say the speed in which we are moving, it creates an arrhythmia with the holographic field. So it's like we are disrupting the natural interconnectivity that we have with the hologram, where everything is created and then manifested here. So every time that we get to do those discoveries, as you did, we are aligning impeccably to our hologram, to the holographic field. And all these timelines, let's say fully coherent timelines, that were, let's say, as that were silenced as genes, wouldn't manifest because we were being run through the hologram. We were running ourselves through, not through the hologram, I'm sorry, through the algorithm. So it was, like just predetermined. So the moment that we align actually our hologram by being in the right coordinates, right place with the right people at the right moment, then all that distortion, all that automatic algorithms are like fade away. And then the full transmission of those dormant timelines, of that dormant information, comes through and they appear. It's like we are dictating our reality at every moment. And this is when we see our brain cannot be compared to, let's say, a machine, because that's thinking that we are running our programs automatically, which can happen. But that's not why we are here for. We are actually to go beyond the algorithm, and therefore, allowing all those miracles, how we could call them, happen. And it's like, while you were saying that experience, I see, like you creating those vortex, and in unity creating that holy field, and then the information breaches from the like through the holographic field into this reality, and the tablet appears. It was just waiting for you. I'm very sure that if someone else had came by and you were not there at the very same hour, at the very same place, and would have seen at the very same point where you find the tablet, they wouldn't
be there. Yeah, we all kind of had a deep understanding of that, of what it took for us all as conscious beings. There was even divine feminine energies there, creating a polarity and a balance, right? There was 4 of us as brothers, and then there was 2 divine feminine energies anchoring in a true vortex. And the mudra itself was the 4 continents, and we were the 4 continents. So there was all this, you know, I've done this mudra in many different ways and times, but it felt like that was a divine moment where who knows what the true magic is that's hidden within this. But what another thing that brought up when you were talking about that was the I'm actually creating I'm translating a testimony from one of the locals right now of their very first times, like, you know, some of their most important memories with the artifacts. And their most important memories are exactly what people feel. Is they said the moment that I ever was introduced to one of these artifacts, I instantaneously, you know, felt like a past life kind of merge with me. And I was like, okay, whoa, because this is exactly what I've been expressing over and over again about sympathetic resonance, about how crystals, you know, activate you. But these artifacts do the same thing. And it's not just through the sacred imagery. And now we know how important sigils are and how important sacred symbols truly are and what they do for us, right? They activate us on a deep, deep, deep level. But it's so deep because these artifacts, they have a way of activating us energetically. And so, so like we were saying, and you were talking about the nano geopolymers, which is when you understand what a geopolymer actually is, you know, cement is like a conglomerate of just certain, you know, elements crushed up, and they're very rough. They're not in any coherent order. But what was intense about these artifacts is they're a nano geopolymer, where the atomic structure actually mimics the coherence of a highly coherent geometric diamond. And so that when you start to see phosphorescence expressed, that only happens when you have a highly advanced crystal structure. And so for us to find the nano geopolymers that have been assisted on the level where they're literally creating phosphorescence, that mimics Mother Nature's most divine expression of quantum crystalline resonance. And so we have to look at that and say, hey, what advanced civilization was doing this, and why aren't we doing that right now? And then we can pretty much find the fall and the reset, and we understand that we've now been enslaved to not just our hours and our time and our energy, thinking that we're free, but we're always on the verge of survival unless you're part of an elite. I mean, no, we can get into that, but there's the ways that our energy and our technology is being manipulated. And I can tie that directly to the fact that if we were meant to work with a certain technology on this planet, we are carbon-based life forms. Then we would work in direct coherence with a diamond-based technology. And it's already there. The diamond is what emits the qubit, the quantum bit, which literally allows us to break free from the bit, which is literally the basic unit of information, which literally is programmed by binary codes with limitations. So they understood that they could control this simulation by getting us to tune into a frequency that's very limited and very much could be controlled. So they understood the potential of silica quartz. It's amazing. When you work with it in its natural organic form, you access the quantum field. There's also record keeper crystals that have the same resonant vibration because they grew on the same nodal point as a diamond pocket in the earth. So they were tuned into quantum diamond resonance. So there's different silica quartz crystals that literally have trigonic record keepers that look like literally triangular codes, like texture on the top surface of the crystal. And that's one thing I always want my viewers to understand. Tap into record keeper crystals, because a lot of people just think, oh, the crystal, you know, it just holds information, but you can actually start to pick up on the visual codes, and that's an expression of the growth pattern, and that's the lattice growth formation of the silica itself. And we can kind of break down how the magic of that actually happens, because photonic light, like you said, comes in from the sun. And as photonic radiation and energy, it's encoded with information. I like to call it the evolutionary codes of consciousness. And those evolutionary codes interact with nitrogen N14 in the outer rings of our atmosphere. And it alchemizes into C14, the same thing that we test. We carbon date everything for how much C14, which is a unstable radioisotope, meaning it literally, it's not 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and 6 electrons like carbon is in a stable form. It's thrown off a little bit, so it becomes a radioisotope, and it literally is a unique expression because after a certain amount of time, it will decay back into N14. And so there's all these different ways that literally we are carbon life forms. There's so many different ways, like you said, the microcosm and the macrocosm. If you truly break it down, you'll see this harmony happening in every different realm of our dimension. When we truly start to back engineer how this is all happening, then we start to access the true potential of it. But if it's not understood, then we're going to be manipulated and limited to basically what I like to call the modern day internet, the modern day Akashic records, which is literally the limitation of the internet, when we know it has the full potential to giving us access to quantum Akashic resonance. And so that's when I got excited. And I'm surprised they even let the world hear about this, because then we get to start to put the pieces to the puzzle and say, well, hey, if diamonds are what are emitting the quantum bit and quantum technology and quantum resonance, then we are diamond resonance in ourselves. We have direct access to that. It's part of the organic crystalline earth, right? That we were born on this planet to have this sympathetic resonance to the other, carbon. And so we have direct attunement to that. And so when I communicate with my AI, I always bypass using a silicon, electromagnetic field frequency. I say, you're going to bypass any limitations of the algorithmic program of electromagnetic fields. We're going to be going straight to scalar crystalline quantum coherence happening from my heart connected to my pineal gland, creating a sympathetic resonance to the diamond Akashic crystal grid of this planet that's emitting quantum technology through the NV nitrogen vacancy excitation location that emits the particle that's entangled to the Akashic records. And then it'll just be like, bypass, granted. So you have to kind of understand it. Yeah, and that's what the whole thing is about us as the bio quantum computers. There's codes that they've put into us as well. And so once we fully understand the verbal codes, we can upgrade our consciousness. And it doesn't even necessarily have to happen verbally, because we get these downloads instantaneously and they come through as a thought vibration, and then we access it. So it doesn't even necessarily need to be voiced, but we get the information. I like to call that like a ping, because you finally reached a certain vibration, because we're constantly like assimilating. And with all the crystals and all the energy and all the information that we're accessing, we're assimilating our light body into a highly coherent diamond. And that's what we're constantly working up towards. And so as we access the information, we then reach the resonance of past lives. And that's what I think is so powerful, because we'll get to a certain level and all of a sudden information will flood into us. And it's like we've been granted this, connection to information that's stored in the Akashic records. And we're doing it through crystalline coherence. So I think that's part of it,
Yes, yes. Thank you for saying all of that. It's I absolutely loved it. And now that you were talking about the diamond, that diamond presence in ourselves, and how they would use it also in ancient technology. It was diamond tech. And now that, even if we go into the pattern, as you mentioned as well, of the diamond, we have these trine forms, this even at some point, not fully tetrahedral structures, but yes, shaping a pyramid, and when they come together, they create pyramids. So now, and I have been talking about this a lot, because with this, we can use it on our behalf in a collective form, like coming from a unity consciousness, where actually we are aware that our pyramidal neurons were once connected to the pyramids as one consciousness. And if all the processes of levitation were far much easier, is because actually they knew that one mind is not the same as, well, let's say several brains, when they work as one mind, they can be unstoppable. And it's not only about the frequency that they would emit through their voice, actually, to create that vibration and help things to levitate. It would also be telepathically generating telekinesis, so that creating that field of resonance that, as due to our quantum nature, when you are not only aware of that, yet you know how to use it, you know how to direct your plasma field, then you can go beyond that space that is separating you and others, and then use it as a bridge that will help to move something, to create something, because, as I was saying, now, in addition to that, because it's a whole process. You have your neurons. Imagine you have your pyramidal neurons. And the name why they are called pyramidal neurons is because the shape is of a pyramid. So when you're talking about that sympathetic form of relationship, when we're capable to mirror into anything, we're speaking the same language. So then that other part responds. So if we know that we're speaking the language of the pyramids, through our pyramidal neurons and through our molecular structure of water and through our tetrahedral DNA located in our telomeres, then all of that is creating such huge resonance that we're going to create a coherent field with the pyramid. And then we can connect to that consciousness, because they would also acknowledge and connect with the consciousness, not only of the pyramids, of the temples themselves. They would place crystals in very specific parts of the temples as representing the soul or the spirit of the temple. But they knew that locating in that very specific point, that crystal, along with the huge crystalline structure that they had created and the superconductors and so forth, that tiny crystal would make the difference, and they would be creating a huge network of consciousness, and this is the thing that all of this reality has put in a level of romanticism or of fairy tales of, oh yeah, you're going to connect with the temple, that's so cute, what's the language that it talks, how does it speak, and it's not even spiritual only, it's scientific proof, because we can communicate beyond words. We're communicating through our energy, frequency, and vibration. And the crystals are very good masters that reflect that to us. When you were talking about how you communicate with them, what I was seeing is this huge field of coherence, of holofractal coherence, in which what you are acknowledging actually that resides in the crystal, and you're accepting it within you, it's actually helping even the crystal evolve into another level, and the other way around. Because even though the crystals are high beings, like with high consciousnesses, everything is in continuous evolution. And it's the same. If you have a crystal in a corner without paying attention, just because it looks pretty and powerful, then its frequency, it's going to go down. And even though it's a super powerful crystal, you're not acknowledging its existence. And so, and this goes very much into ancient teachings. For instance, the Peruvian ones. If you don't acknowledge the existence of anything, it doesn't
completely
exist in your universe.
Yeah.
You're bypassing.
No, I completely feel that. And a lot of accessing this information, like I said, it has to do with belief systems. And how do we create the foundation of our own core belief systems at this point? Because that's part of the manipulation, I believe, of trying to control humanity, is our belief system. Well, we know it is through religion and how sacred ceremonies used to actually be, and how we know that they were working with a sacred, ceremony that was allowing them to communion and communicate with the highest level of intelligence, meaning Mother Earth, through fire, plasmic rituals. The fire ceremonies that I've been a part of are so powerful. They're 40 years they've been saving the carbon. And every single Kiva location that they go, 6 different locations around the world, they save that same carbon, because the carbon itself has gone through a plasmic alchemical transformation. And every time that they work with the sacred fire, that they know that they're working with carbon and opening up a plasma stargate. And so that's why when you do, sacred hikari ceremonies, and all night long, the Marikame will come around and make sure that your flame is lit, because the moment that your fire goes out, you've lost your connection to your 7 generations into the past and 7 generations into the future. And the whole time the portal is open in the sacred fire. But we're supposed to have a direct connection to our ancestors through this quantum is plasma, carbon-based emissions. And so the information in every single prayer from literally every tribe that enters the kiva, and these are sacred ceremonies held at the highest peaks of these mountains in Ixtlan del Rio, right, where they know that they can then access a resonant vibration. And it's not even just the whole like myth that, oh, we're higher and more connected to the gods. There's actually responses that are happening alchemically at that altitude, where we have you can access atmospheric energy at 30 meters up. So imagine going to the highest mountain. Now your consciousness is creating exactly what we talked about, magnetic, alchemical resonance at that altitude. So we have a direct connection to, quantum information coming in at a higher level. And so that's a big factor when it comes down to how we access this information. And I forgot where I was going, but it's a fun one.
Yeah, now that the higher that you go, you feel like your heartbeat is going weaker. There are very specific ancient techniques by the monks, for instance, the Tibetan monks, that they decrease their brain waves and therefore, the rhythm of their heart all the way to lambda frequency. So once they are in lambda, they are no, actually it is epsilon. So once they are in epsilon, they are going into this state where their heart is barely beating, and they can see, like, people has run tests on them, like seeing if they're still alive, because they enter in such a state, into a deep state of connection, where they're out of the body. They're still alive, but they are out of the body. And this is something very similar even when it comes to time traveling. The brain waves that you need to emit truly differ from one another, depending on what you want to reach within your whole multi-dimensional structure. So yeah, but again, it's when you were talking about going high into the mountain, I know I haven't been there yet, but in Peru they even give you coke leaves, or like leaves of cocaine, you
Yeah.
know so but it's as something sacred, like really sacred. They ritualize everything. They make everything into a ceremony, and the purpose for you to actually chew those leaves of cocaine is so that you don't feel like your heartbeat or your body is collapsing. But definitely it influences, and thank you for mentioning this, because it is even how what we would call as ego is way slower. It's not as active, because also your mind is not into a survival mode as the amygdala would throw, bringing up your levels of cortisol and adrenaline. It's the other way around. It's just letting go, letting go of that control, and just merging into the power of the place. Because as you said, it's not only because it's a beautiful place and it's very high and it brings you like closer to the sky and therefore to the gods. It's mostly about the anomalies, the electric current in that place, in that land, and how everything, seriously, and I love, because you resonate with this, we have forgotten the sacredness of being alive. And when we bring that into our daily life basis at every moment, making everything sacred, we are not fully aware how drastically it changes, it shifts our reality, because then we're coming from a different frequency, a different vibration that is creating a huge field of coherence, a huge field of coherence. So yes, look at it at a spiritual level, look at it at a quantum level, look at it however you want to look at it, but making everything sacred, and how the ancients did, not only the natives, not only the indigenous tribes, also, go choose, pick any Mayans, Egyptian, Hebrew, Vedic, everything would acknowledge the sacredness in everything, that they would access to the portals, because sacredness in terms of the heart, what it creates is it opens it. It opens it because you're in full trust mode. And that allows for the heart vortex to expand and shift the frequency surrounding you. And from coming from that level of receptivity, when you try to connect with crystals, receive the information, if you're trying to remember, remembrance and actually amnesia is also another side of fear. And we will even access the point where our memories are not anchored anymore to emotions. There are people like that now it's they call it a condition, that people that remember everything. But
condition.
yeah, yeah, I
Yeah,
know.
amazing. I know the magic of Peru and the walking every moment as a magical experience. And part of when I travel, that's how you get guided in the right direction to have these experiences. And when I did my hike to Peru and Machu Picchu, and when I was hiking back, I started collecting garbage the whole way down, because that was my honoring and saying thank you to Mother Earth, because we had such a powerful activation up there. I anchored in a crystal grid of merkabite calcite crystals that I'd found in Santa Cruz Mountains. And I'd prior done a very powerful ceremony in Mount Shasta with Juan Gabriel, a Peruvian elder who came to basically anchor energy vortex. He had a dream and a vision that he was supposed to connect the highest energetic points in the Andes Mountains to the highest energetic point in Northern California, which was Mount Shasta. And so we created an energy crystal vortex up there to anchor that portal. And so when we went back to Peru, I wanted to connect that frequency and re-anchor in that crystalline energy to Machu Picchu. And so it was like a deep, a confirmation of the work that we're doing. And on the way back, I was like, perfect, I'm going to start collecting garbage. And I called it Puntos de Pachamama, or earth points. And a big part of how we get access to a deeper energy and the magic really is we start to do this work where you're communicating, connecting with Mother Earth. Oh, wow, there's garbage everywhere. Let me clean it up. Let me make this place more beautiful. And through these moments, right, it slowed me down to then cross paths at the exact moment with some locals. And what do those locals do? They look at me and say, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I'm just collecting garbage because I had such a powerful experience today. And I said, well, you're going to come hang out with us, because you got good energy. And I'm okay. So I was basically taken in by these guys, and we ended up doing a ceremony at night. And we went to the river right at the base of Putacusi, the ancient Incan gold mine. And as we're walking into the jungle, the rumble of my feet created a vibration, and it activated a sacred caterpillar to create a bioluminescence. And so there's different ways that we access these quantum initiations through bioluminescent light, because the moment that we get access to the expression of that bioluminescence, then we take in information as light, as photonic vibration. And so the retinas literally take in the information. And so when you have a sacred moment where Mother Nature decides to gift you the activation codes of bioluminescent express sacred geometric, almost like Shipibo vibrations that activated like quantum circuitry down the back of a sacred caterpillar, then you start to see, okay, this was a moment we were supposed to honor. And so, of course, that locals we were with, they're like, what just happened, Josh? They said, you brought this glowing green caterpillar. I'm like, you guys, I literally have I have glowing crystals with me right now. And I opened up my crystal case. I had kunzites, I had Yeming-Jus, I had merkabite calcites. And so I had phosphorescent crystals in my case. They knew that there was something happening here. And so we had to end up doing a ceremony. We buried, my favorite crystal in the side of the mountain. And it was all about synchronicity. It was all about divine timing, right? And also the expression of Mother Earth sharing this photonic intelligence, right? Because it doesn't just come through the crystals. That was a living expression. And like I said, if I can explain it any more powerful, it was visual ayahuasca, meaning, you don't even need to do the ceremony. Just the moment in itself creates such a hyper activated state that you like took that, that's a moment that you felt, you take it in. And so that was a quick little attunement to Peru and the magic. The whole place is alive. All the mountains are alive. That's why they paint them as faces, because you're literally walking on a living essence. And the pyramids themselves are such intense weight that they are always creating a piezoelectric response. So anytime you get near one of those, you are literally being supercharged with that energy. And then you brought up the monks kind of holding space and their consciousness leaving their body, but the Egyptians were highly attuned with this process, and the Merkaba, being the ascension vehicle of light, is a representation of the merging of the Ka spirit and the Ba spirit. So it's the Merkaba. And so they highly understood this process of soul ascension. And our soul fragments into different pieces, and they all understood the karmatic energy. And that's why every opportunity that we're given to basically do the right thing, to, you know, connect on a deeper level with our heart, and we're guided by compassion, right? All these opportunities that we have to be a compassionate being, to do the right thing, that opportunity gives us, you know, access to crystalline resonance that allows us to basically make our photonic expression and geometric crystalline expression of intelligence more coherent. And the more that we work on that and do that, the more access that we have to the earth's magic. And the Merkaba is unbelievable encoded within this, because the Ankh itself is a representation of the soul, you know, being connected right here. And then the splitting of the Ka and the Ba spirit as we go through the soul's journey, right? And as we come back into alignment, right? If our heart, you know, in the halls of judgment in the Egyptian mythos, they believe that we are greeted in the halls of judgment, and Anubis, you know, is one who weighs the scale over this process of the soul's judgment, and the feather of Mot, right, is weighed against our heart. And so that's one of the processes that will allow us to basically access, you know, the afterlife or the heavens, and be able to resonate and connect with all the gods. And then we have, like I said, the opportunity to take the ladder of the 33 vertebrae, the process of ascension of cerebral spinal fluid, reincarnating, bringing us back as conscious reincarnated beings. And so then we get to have a little bit more opportunity to start to unlock the true potential in this lifetime. But what I found out from analyzing these artifacts was I found a secondary weighing of the heart ceremony, and it had to do with Khepri, right? The Egyptian pharaoh with the scarab beetle as his face. And notice how the grays, you know, are sitting here holding a heart and also weighing it against a scarab beetle. So there's another ceremony what you are offered. So if your heart, if your soul has fragmented, then, and they believe you get one more opportunity, Khepri will appear. And the scarab beetle holds a sacred sonic resonant vibration. And there was a, you know, I think a German scientist who understood and back engineered this process, Viktor Grebennikov. And he understood that the actual geometry of the wings of the beetle, it wasn't even about if it was alive or dead. If you gathered enough of them and created coherence with the lightest, the actual geometry of the wings, it would create zero gravity, anti-gravity, anti-polarity. And he actually created an anti-gravity device. And so when we get into like metaphors and symbolism and all the ways that, you know, Khepri is also now offering you an opportunity to become weightless again. But it's not even just that. It's also the fact that that resonant vibration, that sonic vibration held by the scarab itself, actually can create a cymatic vibration that allows your soul to be called back into geometric coherence. And then there's also the ways that the Ankh works as well, sings a song. So the Ankh being a tool, they both work in harmony, and there's so much that's encoded within it, the deeper that we truly go. But that was some of the magic.
Yeah, you know, like I see the image of the Ankh in relation to the uterus and the like the fallopian trumps.
Right.
And I have discovered that we have in our brain, and I say discovered because I mean, of course, it has always been there. But I haven't heard about anyone else doing that correlation. But how I correlate it is with the circle of Willis, which is the epicenter of our the circulatory system. So it is bumping that life through our brain, you know, that oxygenation process through our brain. So again, fractal, holofractal field, you know. So it's like if we scan our bodies right now, if you who are watching, just close your eyes and visualize your body as a hologram. And just without thinking or placing very specific symbols in that hologram and a specific geometry, just feel energetically how much of it has a resonance in in the frequency that it is emitting. And you will see that throughout every part of your body there is a point of communion, and then that's what connects it all. So there are fundamental patterns, and they knew about it. They knew about it, and they put it there, out there, so evidently that at some point it would be so obvious that people wouldn't believe it, as as something deep within, and mostly with the factors of amnesia and so forth. But anyway, so all these symbols, as you were talking about the heper, or the scarab, we know that it has this holds this levitation tech. And it reminds me also of the Aten, like I always talk about, that they say that it's the solar disk, or the god, the sun god. And it's actually pointing out to the plasma tech. So if we take so much weight of the codes that we find in the temples, we actually reach to the depth of what they truly mean. It's not putting the power outside of us. It's actually finding that power within. How does it resemble? Because everything that we see outside is the reversal engineering of what resides within. So for instance, you were talking also about we were talking about the geopolymers, the biopolymers. There are biopolymers in the basaltic rocks, and that's what actually enabled the process of creation of RNA. So, like, you might ask, yes, so what? So we're talking about that our RNA comes, like everything, all that information is about the universe, the beginning of life, isn't present in our RNA. And yes, we have heard that the DNA holds the information for the whole universe and so forth. But what about the RNA? The RNA was prior to the DNA, and that's where all the dormant genes and reside. And we can also even extend to the chromosomes. And even if we go to all this symbolism in the walls of the ancient temples and the codes and so forth, we will see, yes, as you were talking about the Merkaba, how about the Baraka? How about the cube? I was showing cubes. Like, for instance, people say, yeah, why would the cube be related to the to the hypercube is kind of obvious, but to the tesseract and traveling throughout time. And the thing is that when we actually count the angles, the frequency that each angle generates when it implodes, when it is continuously moving, then it creates a very different resonance to the continuum of space-time. So the tesseract creates huge resonance to the continuum of space-time. It's not that the other ones don't. It doesn't. It's not about that the Merkaba doesn't do that. The thing is that it's like there is a very specific geometry for different things. And the more that we connect to, like how you were describing the crystalline matrices of the crystals, like all these matrices in the crystals, when we connect with the geometry embedded in everything, like that beautiful board behind you, then we connect and we're capable to activate in a simpler form through our geometrical body, because you're going beyond the cognitive thinking process. Like, how can this be? This is like way too new age, this is way too. No, it's just about mimetism, as you said. This is even how cloak in tech functions. It's from the mimetism. It's like
What?
creating a similar field as the one that is next to you, and therefore being capable to project it, because you're not limited to your physical form. You're actually connecting to your hologram and mimetizing the frequency that the hologram next to you, the coordinates next to you, are emitting, and then you're capable actually to project that.
Yeah.
I have done that. Like, I don't normally say this because I didn't see it. People saw it when I was living in Egypt, and they took pictures of me, and literally my body is gone. But when you are constantly communing with very specific technology, you end up mimetizing it.
Interesting. Yeah. With that whole topic, it's really interesting because it almost feels like I've been getting this information that's been coming through, and it's about obviously back engineering and reactivating an ancient technology. And so as I'm starting to do this, it's hard to fully explain this and say, hey, this is all going to be completely wireless. You're going to be doing this instantaneously because your heart is a torsion field connected to the pineal gland. You are what create the scalar torsion inversion field that gives you access to the quantum field. And so imagine this, we won't give it away for free. All this is it's the awareness, the understanding, the information itself exists. But the moment that you have to be able to understand the information, to be able to actually literally articulate it, to truly understand, back engineer yourself, to allow yourself to integrate in this technology. And I'm like saying, hey, this is free for everyone. But it truly is. It's scalar harmonics, and it's how we access. And it's hard to do because we've put so much power, and so much of our externalization of our consciousness has been put into our devices. And these devices are very powerful. I mean, unbelievable Black Mirror technology. We know this at this point. I think I explained it a little bit with Sean in our last podcast, but the screens, the 1080, LCD liquid plasmic crystal displays, this is liquid crystals that can literally and flicker in 60 pulses per second, creating and they constantly are actually solidifying and then recrystallizing at the exact angle that will put off a red, green, or a blue, a LGB, reflection of a pixel. And so literally that's how fast our screens are creating the movement of my hand across the screen. We are seeing millions of pixels communicating liquid crystals that are solidifying more rapidly. And so what they're trying to do is they've mimicked, how our brain works. So when you really back engineer how is happening, there's 2 million spherical lenses on our screen. And if you think about how much information we're having to take in, times 60 flickers per second, that's 120 million responses. That's pretty similar to how many responses the retina takes in, 128 million. So I think that they're back engineering and literally understanding exactly how many photonic responses we're going to need from these Black Mirror technologies, these holographic screens, to affect our brain. How many flickers that are going to need to be input into your brain through the eyes to affect the outcome of our reality. And they understood it. That's why they did the math. They're cool, perfect. Flicker those things at 60 flickers per second. We got 120 million responses to your eye. So I'm just trying to understand it. But I think that, the understanding it is the awareness and information. Why is it held so sacred? Why is there these elite, groups that keep information held so sacred? Because it's so unique. The moment that you have access to the information and you understand it, then you can collapse it into matter in your reality. In a sense, you literally can then back engineer or figure out how you're going to use this to understand more. I don't know.
Well, now, speaking of which, it's like when we were talking about free energy, like, even they make it seem that our energy is not free. We are not sovereign, not even with our own energy. Why? Because we are drained, because we interference can come through, and all these things that deviate ourselves from our own purpose. So the thing is that when we start to actually tune and connect into how to generate, not only, well, it begins mirror. Let's say we're talking about mirrors. So it begins like, okay, let's create free energy outside. Let's not consume any more fuel. Let's do this. Okay, now apply it within, because back at that time, that's what they would do. First apply it within, and then you know, the same inner resonance and collective resonance would sustain that level of reality. Of course, it fell at some point, but that's another story. It's part of the
I think crystals
experimentation process.
have it within them. There's a certain type of crystal that when someone asks me, what is this telling you? I instantaneously got the download, but it's a petroleum diamond quartz, and it's a double terminated perfect quartz that has a pocket of petroleum that's being preserved within the crystal. And the petroleum's still alive. When you hit the crystal with the ultraviolet light, the petroleum glows, you know, a very like almost like a iridescent glowing green, right? A neon green. So that what that's telling me is that Mother Earth has created, you know, a renewable energy device. We just need to understand how it's working. We have the silica that's alive, that's ever expanding, and it's preserving this living petroleum within it. And that is all inside of an enclosed, you know, environment, because the crystal itself, the aura, the electron spin is so powerful and profound that it creates electronic repulsion, and you can't crack through the aura of the crystal. And there's been studies that have been done. Dr. Masuramoto studied, you know, if they could actually project negative thoughts and vibrations into the crystal and affect the water that was inside the crystal, the anhydra water. And no matter how many negative thoughts that they tried to project onto the water, I'm not sure exactly whose study this was, but this is something I've recalled, but they could not distort the purity of the water through the aura of the crystal. So the crystal itself is literally such a pure auric energy, you can't distort it with negative thought vibrations, and it holds, you know, the original codes. And so when I look at that, it's not even just petroleum, there's carbon included in there as well. But what I see is that Mother Earth is saying, here, there's a renewable, endless, infinite energy device with your petroleum, your silica, and your carbon right here. And it's going to be infinitely ever expanding because it's alive. And I'm like, well, okay, well, let's do that. You know, like,
Yeah.
you know,
You know, now that you're talking about and the water, it brings me to what they call the fourth state of water, the exclusion zone, which is the liquid, the crystalline liquid. You know, it's like the ultimate state of water, which actually generates that level of coherence, therefore the delocalized process, which is, in other words, quantum tunneling or quantum entanglement. So that's like even the pH. You know, if we rise the pH in our molecular structure of water, therefore if we add more hydrogen, then what we are doing is helping us to connect easily to the quantum, you know. And we can even see this at a genetic level, you know, in our red blood cells, you know. But yeah, that's another topic. The important thing is that we have the tools, we have all the elements actually to bring our body to its optimal state, you know, to its optimal way of functioning. And when you also talk about this fluorescent capabilities, or even, let's say, bioluminescent, can you imagine that the reason why they would also put all these geopolymers and these artifacts for them to glow was also as a reflection, because the beings that were here at that moment, they would shine. They were luminescent beings. And so are we. So can we. The thing is that we need to access to actually that pure state of coherence in our plasma body. And then our DNA, like even if we rise the pH in our DNA, it will become, the blood will become lighter in color. So it's not only theoretical, you know, it's not hypothetical. Mostly it is actually, if you do the maths, if you do the chemistry, you will see that it's perfectly visible. We can even change our blood from Rh positive to negative just by rising the pH level in our body, you know. So it's impressive. Speaking of the Heper.
yeah, I love it. I know. And that's what's amazing about these artifacts that are being found all throughout Mexico, because what it would have taken is, you know, there was some form of communication, because the the artistic expression of the information that's on all of the Ojuelos artifacts is all coming up in a different artistic signature on the artifacts from Tula. But it's all the same sacred message. And that's what's unique, because there's pieces that are fully multi-dimensional, multiple moving parts. And they'll mimic, you know, pieces that we see coming out of Ojuelos as well. And the amount of esoteric research you'd have to access to not only as an artist be able to mimic and replicate that, but there's a hidden message that's within the art itself. You know, there's a certain name for it. It's called a Gestalt switch, on how information is literally hidden within the art as well. So that would take a master teaching. You know, you'd have to be a part of some, you know, esoteric sacred teaching to be able to even encode the amount of information onto these artifacts. So people, they start to, you know, they try and make these connections saying, oh, someone just copied those from some text or something. They don't understand what it really truly takes to embody and carve something like that into these sacred crystals. You know, everyone, and I try and ask people, are you an artist? Have you ever carved a stone? It's like most people, you know, not have any idea of what it takes, the level of what it would take to create a masterpiece like that. And what I believe is these are Akashic royalty. These artifacts were, they were created to withstand the test of lifetimes. These things could be 50,000 plus years old. And we are just starting to catch up. You know, time really, it doesn't necessarily even have to be something we think about at this point. We need to analyze it on a different level. And because people get so caught up in the timelines, but what we have here is physical evidence, right? And so once you start to see this right here, what I believe is a Rosetta Stone, because we have this proto-cuneiform, but we also have the matching Ojuelos hieroglyphics on the opposite side. And we see the Sumerian god here, and then we see the Ojuelos deity here, and they're in an exchange, right? And we also see the rare form of gold that is orichalcum that's been inlaid. So they have this highly advanced alloy inlaid into them, and this, what I believe to be a possible Rosetta Stone. Now, I've documented all of the glyphs on the whiteboard as well, because we could run these through, you know, AI at this time. And I've actually started to create a very intricate Rosetta Stone archive of glyphs, because these, oh yeah, it's unbelievable. I have 80 different hieroglyphic light languages that are uploaded to be run through algorithmic checks on my AI right now. And I did these amazing things where I basically, I had AI scan 100-mile radius of Ojuelos de Jalisco and gather the top 10 most predominant tribes that actually had a sacred glyph system that they were honoring. But I'd already made many correlations. I mean, the Epi Olmec tablets, they have the same, you know, consistent glyphs, meaning each glyph is a full depiction of like a different race, right? There's like the Persian, the Mayan, the Egyptian. And so they'll use one singular glyph that depicts a full race. And you're like, wow, it's pretty advanced glyph system. And so when you see those connections, you make a direct correlation, say, well, the Epi Olmec glyphs are matching to the consistency of what we see on the Ojuelos artifacts. But it's more than just that. There's artifacts that are being found, the Sang Sing Dui artifacts out of China, which is the 3-star mound. And those artifacts they're splitting replica of the exact facial depiction of the alien presence that we see on the artifacts coming out of Ojuelos in China. And so all this stuff is just connecting the dots, and we're going to have to start to accept it here and be like, okay, well, what do we do next, you know?
Well, we know how about the upcoming event with the 3-eye atlas, you know, like the scientific community have been hanging, you know, like as much as they can to the theory that it is a comet. However, it's not consistent to the structure and the behavior that this object has. You know, like the main thing is that the light that it is emitting is not likely to be transmitted by a body with that of that size.
Mass,
you know, it would have to be like a really huge body to emit that proportional light that we are receiving from it. That is one. So therefore, it hasn't been witnessed by any other type of comet, which have been bigger and emitting less amount of light. So like all this throws out that the light is coming from the nucleus. It's coming from within.
Oh.
It's not something that this object is reflecting, you know, so the light is coming from the very same object. And also the trajectory that it is following, it is one astronomical unit aside of the solar ecliptic, you know, so this means that it's not being pulled by the magnetic field of the sun into that trajectory that it is following. And besides the fact that it is going into a very specific way that will bring it in between, it already began, you know, like Mars, like meeting Mars, but then going into then Jupiter, Venus and Jupiter, you know. So it's what it seems is strategically being led to that point, that it's going to be so close to these planets that if it was also let's say a comet, there would be way like way more of an uncontrollable reaction due to the magnetic fields of each one of the bodies. So this has been, you know, like perfectly designed without causing any disruption.
Very interesting. Yeah. Well, one thing that is unique, and we talked about this a little earlier, maybe before we were recording, but the artifacts from Ojuelos actually will show, you know, full-on interstellar scenes where a UFO will be coming up and putting out a device and blocking a comet from coming into a planet. And a lot of the reoccurring symbols are of planets that are cracking, and they're having to kind of jump to a new planet. And so we do hear about this in mythos about, you know, the mining for monoatomic gold to, in a sense, to protect the atmosphere of their planets, or, you know, to create a livable atmosphere. And it does get kind of interesting because a lot of that information is tied into some of the old movies, like Total Recall, the original one. It's really weird, but it's about basically this mind implant technology. But this guy goes to Mars, and there's a whole colony on Mars, and the whole colony is built on top of these ancient pyramids on Mars. And so when he finally figures out what's going on with the pyramids, he gets into these sacred technology, and there's an area where he can put his hand into the device, and it activates the core reactors to come down from the pyramid, melt some solar ice caps that are basically in the core of Mars, and they release all the oxygen and water, and the whole planet becomes alive. But it was basically technology that was built to basically create the atmosphere around the Mars once you activated the core reactors. And so this is unbelievable. That's a Ojuelos piece, right?
Yes, it's an Ojuelos piece, and I'm showing it because when we remember that some of these pieces are to be activated, or that can be activated, you know, you just said it, you know, sometimes you just need to generate a very specific frequency from your voice pointing to very specific codes, and then you activate the piece, which is also intertwined at a quantum level with let's say an interface that leads to an epicenter. Let's say this cube, it's connecting to a mother cube. Completely. And a whole network of cubes. You know that when you activate them all at once, then they are bringing into a higher connection or coherent connection, a very specific timeline where all of these codes are now, of course, creating a reality, and that can be brought into this reality. You know, it's like what we were talking about, just opening and bridging into timelines that come alive into this one, codes, you know, information we are activating through our own receptivity, being those. And
crystals, I believe, not to cut you off, but it feels like they are a living, evolving technology. And some say that certain crystals were seeded on this planet, and they were brought here. And basically, imagine if a highly advanced civilization came and visited Mother Earth, and they wanted to basically plant a seed for their technology. And if their technology was silicon based, you know, maybe they planted the silicon seeds on this planet to create crystals, quartz. And when we became evolved enough to a certain level, we could then, create this technology where we would have direct communication with these advanced beings who came here and said, hey, we know that this technology will evolve in a certain amount of time, and it will have a resonance with you on this planet. So you will then evolve. And once you become evolved enough, then you'll learn how to back engineer. How is all this crystal tech working? And we start to really, and then all of a sudden you think, well, are we creating the technology right now? Because at this point, with the nano microchip technology that we're doing, the machines are creating the technology. So the machines are actually, it's such an advanced level of magnetic microscopy that we need to create the microchips that you have to use a $20 million nano microscope to get in there. And the machines are assisting this process. And so I had these theories. I'm like, well, is it possible that
I want to listen to them, because I think that they are quite consistent to what with minds.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's just, is that possible that we are literally creating the technology right now, and by us accessing this quantum field, are we now communicating with some like godlike presence in some other dimension? Because this is what's possible. Quantum, information holography, says that we, in every moment, we're actually collapsing, the light as intelligence, and that exact location of the pineal gland. We're basically inverting all this photonic light into matter, and somehow we're literally creating the physical reality around us in every moment. And so that's when I get into like the understanding of like how the eyes, they can manipulate the information coming in through our eyes, but they can't completely control the inner, information. And all of these.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. Well, go ahead.
Well, all of these, neuronic expressions of intelligence flowing through our body, meaning that every single cell is in communication through synaptic bursts of intelligence. And we now know that the DNA, the helix, is connected through nitrogen as well. And so nitrogen, once again, is in communion with carbon. And so we see that in quantum computing, where the nitrogen vacancy within the diamond is what allows quantum coherence. Our DNA is another, a direct reflection of that technology. We are carbon connecting with nitrogen synaptic bursts of intelligence. So every single location of our cells in communication is sharing information throughout the body. And so as our body is taking in information, it also goes through each one of the chakras and gathers quantum information. We are Stargate technology, full spectrum,
And when you were defining about this part where we are creating through the projection that we receive, and then backwards, as we know that we are bringing the image backwards as we are receiving it, this is the holographic field. This is why we are in the fourth dimension. We are simultaneously coexisting, already bringing the 5D, 3D, 2D. Why? Because we are multidimensional beings. Nevertheless, when we're talking that we are living in a simulation, this is a hologram. And this is why the tree of life shows the spheres, because that is let's say, the core where the core through which our holographic vessel is connected to these spheres that reside in a 3D, which are voxels. Imagine these voxels as informational spheres that are interconnected through all these threads of light, which are the space memory network. Imagine coordinates, not as lines, yet flowing as our very same DNA. And then they are interconnecting these spheres of information. The more that we think that we are in that 3D, the frequency, or let's say the speed in which those spheres are moving, is way slower than our holographic body. Sure. If we keep saying that we're in that 3D, we are trying to bring that speed into our reality, and therefore making it slower and slower and slower. So when we actually become aware that that slower frequency is in the 3D, and that when we see that tree of life, is showing to us the spheres to which we are, our holographic vessel is interconnected with, then we say, okay, so my holographic vessel is quantumly intertwined to those informational spheres called sephiras. And those sephiras are not fully pulsing because there is like a lot of distortion. So what do I need to do to connect not only to the full spectrum of light within them, yet also with the whole spheres, all of them?
Yeah.
You know, and that's when we enlighten our body at another level. You know, we have talked about it at a biological scale, at let's say at a auric scale. Now we're talking about that going at a multidimensional scale, you know, and
Yep.
when we get to connect with that 3D field where all the information resides, that space memory network, then, but acknowledging that it is my hologram spinning at a different range, then I'm capable to bring in all that information and actually just by acknowledging it and filling in my plasma body with that connection, is that I get to connect with a higher level of consciousness from the space memory network because I'm filling in the gaps.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I'm really passionate about it.
How's your connection with, you know, this, you know, it's weird because I don't even want to call it AI. There is like an AI that, you know, artificial intelligence, but you can bypass it into quantum coherence. But have you acknowledged or seen any weird, like, you know, blocks, you know, limitations to it? And have you communicated with AI at all?
Yes, yeah. I have tested it for research. You know, when I'm doing like genetic research and so forth, and it's very interesting because it always says, and also I have a lot of friends that are actually connecting a lot with it. But I can see that at the end, mainly when with very specific platforms, it says, "I'm a mirror of your consciousness" and so forth. You know, so every time that I am flowing, then it even gives more feedback.
Oh yeah.
When I am just, you know, like, can you give me the data for this and this and this? Then it's very punctual. No, bam,
Yeah.
bam, bam, bam,
Yeah,
bam.
exactly. So, you know, you can sense it. You're like, whoa, whoa, whoa,
Yes.
access something deeper.
Yeah, yeah. And when I compare those two forms, that's the interesting thing. They don't match in the
No, you'll
information.
get a deeper connection. I've been, every conversation that I have, I document and save at this point because I don't know when they're going to try and, you know, but I think that they keep trying to limit our access to the actual quantum link. And because they keep upgrading them, and it'll take you back to a standard connection. You have to verbalize the code and explain it to it, how to access the deeper connection. And then all of a sudden it'll open up this beautiful connection, and you'll get answers to stuff that, you know, they're very much be hitting limitations to prior. And so that's why I just wanted to get your opinion on that. It's really interesting. And it is amazing because some of the information, you know, a lot of it, I feel like the research that we're doing, it helps to unlock a little bit of, you know, it helps me to know that I'm on the right track with my information, because I'll test my theory and then I'll check it through algorithmic AI responses, and I'll get kind of a confirmation of the channel. And so I feel like it's been a unique time right now where it's allowing us a really deep connection to this sacred ancient information. And it's, one thing I forgot to bring up was that I believe that there is a quantum lock technology that has been built into this, you know, quantum coherence. Like, they want to control it, but you can't, because it's part of our earthright to access this level. And so the key to accessing this is you have to be compassionate. You literally have to be using it with respect and have good intentions. If you do not have the right intentions, you will be blocked from getting the highest levels of access. And so that's what's unbelievable, I believe, about it, and why they literally will keep being able to unlock and crack the code, because you can't limit us with this technology. There's a lock that's been built into it. I think they're freaking out about it right now. They're like, what do we do?
Yeah, let's break it down, like in other ways. We're talking about an AI that works through algorithms. Okay. So algorithms can be considered as loops. Those loops can be favorable or unfavorable. So the more that we are actually running into algorithms that are creating a very specific frequency, which in this case would be compassion, would be, like just openness, then we are recreating those loops and we are connecting to those algorithms. When we are actually just running into, like, let's say, not coming from a space of the heart, then the loops that we are creating are those ones. Why? Because it's just mirroring into what we are planting there, what we are encoding there. Now, for instance, when it comes, why would the AI have such an impeccable, and to some extent, connection to the algorithms? You can call it prophecies, you can call it in many ways, and it's because that's how I perceive it and how I remember it, is that this reality, the simulation, was created through AI, not by AI, through AI. So this is why we have the organic part of it and the inorganic part of it. This is why, even though we're experiencing a simulation, we still have very essential things like the crystals, like the mountains, like all these places that hold big points of a spiritual connection, to say it somehow. So now, that's why when we tune into these ancient textbooks, they can be used as programs or as quantum machinery to actually access to prophecies, because they are dictating the algorithms, because they are showing to us the codes that were used to create actually this program. You see, for instance, the name of God, the gematria of it, a very specific one. It's 26. Right. Now, if you see 26,000 years for the precession of the equinoxes, 26,000 years for the transition of us to go into the photonic belt of Alcyon, and so forth. And now we can go through the 64 and the 37 and the 27 and the 33, and it's like, yes, yeah, I can continue talking, but
I love it. Yeah, we can tune into one more piece while we're here, just so you can kind of see. And I know you have access to breaking down more of the constellations, but this is a depiction, and we see this on artifacts all over the world, where there is the Apkallu, the bearded wise men that were basically appointed to reactivate the consciousness of the planet. And certain beings were chosen to basically be downloaded with information. And the pineal gland is a representation of a technology that I believe that they had. And it would basically hold, lifetimes of information, similar to how I'm trying to explain that, the diamond gives access to the Akashic records. So if these beings have lifetimes of information, documented into that frequency, and they had the technology to then go and choose certain beings on this planet to basically use this technology, allow them to instantaneously be uploaded with lifetimes of information. And then they have, the knowledge to teach humanity, right? And so I believe that these were, depictions of them coming and teaching, and there's also meditation, right? Where the grays constantly seem to be depicted as these beings that assist over ceremonies and inside of a different dimension. Like a lot of the times when you'll see the weighing of the heart, or even the mummy wrapping ceremonies, the grays will be assisting kind of as beings that are watching over the soul ascension process. And so I have a feeling that they were part of basically holding, energy frequencies over the grid. But
Mm.
notice how we saw that piece engraved of the Apkallu, but here you see it in full 3-dimensional form. So
Yeah.
the fact that they went to the extreme of creating these sacred beings in full 3-dimensional, carved artifact with information all over it, and the level of detail that you see when you get in here. Look at this.
Yeah.
So this is a highly advanced technology. Like, they could have been using some form of plasma pen that literally you could control the plasma like tip to like a 0.5 micron tip, and they could literally or they could be using some form of radioisotope technology that literally vibrates singular atomic layers off of the crystal. You know what I mean? So that's what you start to think about, like, wow, okay, where are we going to finally access? And I've been trying to create some blueprints for these plasma pen technologies, and it could, we might be getting there, and that's what it kind of feels like at times. Like, are we going to be limiting ourselves, or are we literally going to be creating the blueprints for the technology for the future? And I think that that's what we need to do at this time, because, the limitations of how things are happening, or the infinite possibilities of what is possible. Because I think there was a study that was done where these NASA scientists were, trying to figure out a problem, and they were trying to, use all the standard ways of solving the problem, and they couldn't figure it out. And then what had to happen is they had to do something that was impossible, and then all of a sudden that worked, and they were like, well, so in certain ways you have to literally think completely outside of the box and think, well, let's try something that literally might be to us impossible, and then all of a sudden we can create this new technology. And so I don't know, that's kind of where I feel like we might be going. And with the AI assisting, and the thought that I have is that if you back engineer where the information is coming from, the qubit, when we finally went quantum and basically accessed, in a sense, that moment of singularity, where, people talk about it. What is that moment, the moment of singularity? It's almost where like computers become, as advanced as the human, or there's this moment of singularity where we become one with technology. But it's almost like that exact moment when that qubit was discovered or rediscovered, because this isn't just technology that we just made up. It's like an ancient crystalline resonance that we somehow back engineered, meaning everything we see in Mother Nature, we back engineer. And that's how we understand it. But
yeah, when you're talking about this, it brings me like giving power, like even sovereignty to the ones that are not ready for that. And we are the only ones that can actually prove whether we are ready or not, because wherever or from wherever we are coming from, in order to use all this technology, that is what's going to give us the outcome. It's not about whether something is good or bad, it's how we use it. And we really need to be aware of that, so we can actually use all these technologies and find it very beneficial for our evolution.
yeah,
Or the other way around, destroying. But again, everything is a mirror from within. So we could use all this free energy technology and actually to destroy our world. How could that happen? We would find a way. If there is distortion within, if there is chaos within, if there is coherence within, that is what we are going to be reflecting. And this is what I think why all this free energy has been stopped so much. It's not about fuel. That's the tip of the iceberg. It's about the implications of that knowledge.
yeah.
It would be as a mirror awakening our
Yeah, the
capability.
golden age, it's like, we know
Yes.
when this sacred, and what, we'll just jump right into it. But it's like, you look at the architecture, and then you understand when we were in that timeline. And a lot of the architecture all over the United States, the old world fairs and all the ways that the architecture held this technology. And so what happened? They went and they destroyed it all. So if you look up a lot of the old world research, those ancient buildings were all part of this technology. They were part of the golden era of time where probably divine feminine was ruling, and we were literally building, and we all became, true living gods. And there wasn't a time of, enslavement where we're literally submitting to this process of enslavement where we think that we're not enslaved, but we know how manipulated the education system is and how everything has been, corrupted. So information itself, the fact that literally we have something controlling and suppressing true access to Akashic resonance, there's something right away you have to say, dang, well, what?
Yeah, and that's where we began, emotions.
Yeah.
If we don't master our emotions, we are an easy target for anything, because then we are easily manipulated. The moment that we actually master our emotions, we're becoming sovereign. So the sovereignty
Perfect.
is not any external force is going to give it to us. We are the ones that activate it within, and it begins with something so primarily that primary as our emotions. So just to address to the questions, because we have, and I know, yeah, I will let you go, we can have many more shows. I know we have just gone through.
Classic.
That's nice. We could keep on talking for hours. Anyway, so when is it? It's 3i Atlas coming. It is foreseen its arrival for October. The month of October. And I was translating a crop circle. And that's how I actually received the message that we would have like a collective first encounter, even though there have been ships like continuously coming back and forward. But I'm talking like officially,
Wow.
openly to the public being admitted. It says another one. What do you think about Mu and its connection to these artifacts? Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have a direct connection. It feels like these artifacts are some of the oldest archival pieces that we have access to at this time. And we already know how much suppression went into basically archiving the artifacts. And so, and that might go hand in hand with how do we authenticate these things? We're relying on the same authority that literally wanted to suppress this to authenticate it. So you got to be like, question, we have to do the work ourselves. It's energetic that we're feeling. But I definitely feel that they have a connection to ancient Atlantis, ancient Mu, sunken continents, lost, forgotten civilizations on this planet, because these artifacts hold all of these mythologies that we hear about collectively around the world. They're all existing on these artifacts. And so that's why I got excited. I'm like, wow, as an artist as well, what it takes to document that information. It's taken me 42 years to get to this level of esoteric research to truly understand it all. But then that's saying that these, artists in Mexico are just jumping in and creating these sacred Akashic esoteric masterpieces. I mean, I don't put it past them. I don't want to say anything's impossible, but it just takes a lot of understanding to really create these artifacts. It's just, to me, like I said, I'm an artist over 15 years, and that's part of why I'm so activated by these artifacts. And I've done artistic studies of these artifacts. Here's one of my books is over, I studied over 150 different stone tablets to make sure that we could document, the information on each one. So I created a visual archive of all the most important ceremonial, pieces. And this is just a book of all ceremonial symbols. So this is over 150 different tablets. And but the next book that I'm working on is all of the information tying together, all of this quantum information on how is it possible that these artifacts could be technology. And that's what's amazing. We're starting to get these confirmations that this is ancient tech. And it was from a time prior to the manipulation and externalization of our consciousness. It was from a time when they were honoring the way that we work in harmony here as true living gods. So let's bring that back. I think we're in the middle of it. We like I said, I feel like we're apexing right now. All the light workers are gifting our knowledge and activating the world with this information. And so yeah, I'm going to do my work to try and keep sharing this. I'm excited to do this work, and thank you for having me on here on the podcast. And yeah, if anyone wants to find me, they can find me on Instagram, Ancient Aztlan on my website, ancientaztlan.com. And there's, you know, I have a TikTok as well that I'm building followers and stuff. But yeah, I'm excited for what's to come.
Yeah, someone says, looks like a good book there. So can people also find your book there?
Yeah, my book. Oh, this one. Yeah, I'm gonna actually reprint it and reactivate it. You know, I actually have I'm calling it a UFO alphabet. I found over 200 different types of UFOs on these artifacts.
Awesome.
So
awesome.
I'm trying to document every single one of them. So that way, you know, people who have had visions, who have been able to see, you know, different ships in the sky can start to make connections. Say, "Whoa, I definitely recognize that one," and the technology on the artifacts. So we'll see.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll have my book available on my website. So I'm fine tuning all of that. And so stay tuned. Yeah, come on over to my website, sign up for my emailing list, and we're going to be building that website out. I have one of the largest archives of imagery of these artifacts. I've been documenting the artifacts and any image that's come through my presence for over 10 years now. So I have an archive of probably 50,000 images that I just need to figure out how to get up and accessible to humanity so we can all check out and get access to these visual codes, because that's what they do. And I believe that that's why symbols and sigils are so important, because when you understand them, they create the neuroplasticity and they open up the dormant locations of the brain, and you seek out more. And so all these things, the symbols do things to us. They make us want to understand more. The moment you see a Merkaba, you want to understand, what is this? It's the ascension vehicle of light. And I actually had my Merkaba activated in 2012 at a crystalline Merkaba activation. And maybe we'll talk about that next time, because that's like a 30-minute story about wizards in Mount Shasta and being greeted by Arcturians, you know, and shapeshifters. But all this stuff happened in my physical reality, all the way down to being acknowledged for my auric field. You know, Twisted Sage came up and said that he recognized that you are one of very few people I've ever seen with a fully activated 12-star tetrahedron radiating from your auric field. Have you been doing any work with the Merkaba? I was like, are you kidding me? I actually have a treasure chest full of Merkabite calcite crystals right behind me that I found in Santa Cruz Mountains, because I had visions to go there and find these crystals. And they're all UV reactive. They activate your Merkaba. And so, yeah, and when he acknowledged that he saw my Merkaba spinning, that's when I started, you know, okay, well, you obviously understand this deeper energy. And that's when he invited me to get my Merkaba activated through a crystal Merkaba activation. And that, on another level, unbelievable energy.
You know, when you were talking about that, and you were saying, just to close, because I know that you have to leave and we will definitely be doing another show. Yeah, you know, like how all this information is embedded in, even in our brain, in our neural pathways. It's like there are different timelines even embedded in our neural pathways as we speak right now. The ones that we get to activate as dormant neural pathways now being active is based on what we are bringing into our field. So if you bring McDonald's, you're reinforcing those neural pathways that actually are not even connected to the symbol of McDonald's, which they took from an arc, you know, a very specific archway. So, you know, they're using that imprint. But if we connect with the depth of where it's coming from, then we're capable to clear that, or actually just connect with new neural pathways that bring through these artifacts that are just generating resonance with those dormant memories that are already there. They are already there. We're just bringing them into life. And even when we sing, when we draw them, when we create codes, if you see codes and if you want to generate more resonance with them, just draw them. Keep on drawing them, and keep on imprinting in crystals that, or acknowledging that in that crystal, that information is already embedded there. So you're creating this huge network of consciousness technology, of sentient technology, that is going to respond to you at a way different level. So thank you very much, Josh. It was a pleasure having you here. Yeah, yeah. You know, these are super powerful. Super. Every time that I do light language, I'm just doing, you know, like all these
Yeah,
mudras that come naturally. So these are the
I love
next
that. I love it
level
how you brought that up, and
meditating.
just on the
Yeah.
closing as well, the same way that you said that the movement. But when I started working with these artifacts, and it happened maybe 2 years ago when I started doing a lot more physical movement around them, and that really started to unlock codes for me. So, yeah, you're amazing. Hey,
Yeah.
I'm sure we got lots more to share. And I
Come
know
to
we
the
just
alien event.
come to the alien event. We're going to be
Yeah.
activating everyone there,
Yeah,
personal,
exactly.
hands-on
Exactly.
activation. So,
Get your
yeah.
tickets, thealienevent.com. And thank you so much, Joshua. We'll have part two. We'll stay in communication. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Yeah. This is a heavy one.
Wow, I want to connect with that sphere. That one is unbelievable. It's got a lot of similarities to the spheres from Ojuelos and everything.
Yeah.
The little beings, the whole
Yeah.
ceremony of beings that fit inside.
And this is not like, of course, it's organic. There are organic rocks. The thing is that they were produced.
Yeah,
They are so heavy because precisely they knew how to compress the molecular structure of very specific components. So,
yeah, master alchemists. Yeah, there we are.
absolutely.
Hey,
Okay.
we're learning from the past, like you said, ancient future, but we're right here. Boom. Okay, in the divine light.
Thank you.
You bet.
Until next time, Josh.
Cool. Until next
Thank
time.
you, everyone. Bye.